Blood trickled down Jasmine Montgomery's cheek as the flight attendant's hand left a stinging mark. On her own private jet, wearing her CEO badge, she stood frozen. The white man smirked, unaware the entire cabin crew's careers would end before they reached cruising altitude. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination in action, and subscribe to stay updated on stories of justice being served. Now, let's uncover how a simple boarding turned into a career-ending mistake for an entire flight crew. Jasmine Montgomery wasn't born into privilege. Far from it. Growing up in the roughest neighborhood of South Chicago, she learned early that the world wasn't designed for someone who looked like her to succeed. Her single mother worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads, often leaving young Jasmine alone with her textbooks and wild dreams of flying. "The sky has no prejudice," her mother would tell her. "Up there, it doesn't matter what color your skin is." Those words became Jasmine's mantra through high school, where she excelled in science and mathematics despite being the only black girl in advanced placement classes. Teachers questioned her test scores, assuming she must be cheating. Classmates avoided partnering with her on projects. But Jasmine kept her eyes fixed upward, toward that unprejudiced sky. She won a scholarship to MIT, where she studied aerospace engineering. College wasn't easier socially, she was still an outsider, but Jasmine found comfort in the precision of physics and the reliability of mathematics. While her peers partied, she spent nights in the lab, developing what would eventually become her breakthrough. A revolutionary fuel-efficient jet engine design that reduced carbon emissions by 38%. After graduation, Jasmine took her designs to 12 major aviation companies. 11 dismissed her outright. Executives stared at her dark skin and tight curls rather than her blueprints. Some suggested she apply for more suitable positions in human resources or diversity departments. One CEO even mistook her for the janitorial staff despite her expensive suit and portfolio. The 12th company, a small startup called AirTech, took a chance on her design. Within 3 years, her engine became their flagship product, turning the struggling company into an industry contender. But when the time came for promotions, Jasmine watched white male colleagues with half her qualifications climb the ladder while she remained stagnant. "We just don't think you have the right image for leadership," her supervisor explained awkwardly during her 4th denied promotion. That night, Jasmine quit and mortgaged everything she owned to found Montgomery Aviation. The early years were brutal. Investors backed out after face-to-face meetings. Suppliers charged her higher rates. Potential clients questioned her expertise despite her patents and proven track record. But Jasmine persisted. She recruited other talented engineers who had been overlooked because of their race, gender, or background. Together, they expanded on her original designs, creating even more efficient systems that airlines couldn't afford to ignore. 7 years after founding Montgomery Aviation, Jasmine signed a contract with the U.S. Air Force to retrofit their fleet with her company's engines. The deal was worth billions. Industry publications that had previously ignored her now clamored for interviews. Montgomery Aviation's stock price tripled overnight. Success brought visibility but didn't shield Jasmine from prejudice. If anything, it intensified. At industry conferences, she was still mistaken for waitstaff or assistants. Security guards followed her around luxury hotels where events were held. Flight attendants directed her to economy even when she held first-class tickets. After a particularly humiliating incident where airport security detained her for suspicious behavior, working on confidential designs during a commercial flight, Jasmine decided enough was enough. Montgomery Aviation was now worth over $3 billion. She could afford her own jet. The purchase was practical rather than extravagant. As CEO, she needed to visit manufacturing facilities, meet with clients, and attend conferences worldwide. A private jet meant no more random security checks. no more suspicious glances from flight attendants, no more cramped seats next to passengers who requested reassignment when she sat beside them. Jasmine researched private flight service companies thoroughly before selecting Elite Air Services, a company with an impeccable reputation for discretion and customer care. Their marketing materials showcased diverse clients, and their public statements emphasized respect and personalized service. Their reviews were stellar across the board. The morning of the fateful flight, Jasmine woke with excitement. She was heading to Geneva to deliver the keynote address at the International Aviation Summit. Her speech would announce Montgomery Aviation's expansion into commercial passenger aircraft, a move that would create thousands of jobs and directly compete with Boeing and Airbus. She dressed meticulously in a tailored navy suit, pearl earrings, and her signature red-soled heels. The Montgomery Aviation logo pin, a golden wing, gleamed on her lapel beside her CEO identification badge. "Today is going to be historic," she told her reflection, not knowing just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The exclusive private terminal at O'Hare International Airport existed in a different universe from the main concourses. No security lines, no overcrowded gates, no overpriced coffee shops. Just hushed conversations, leather armchairs, and discreet service. At least, that was the advertised experience. Jasmine arrived 15 minutes early, her executive assistant Thomas Wheeler trailing behind with their briefcases. Thomas, a young white man with rimless glasses and immaculate suits, had been with Jasmine since Montgomery Aviation's early days. He believed in her vision and had turned down offers from Google and Amazon to stay with the company. MS. Montgomery for the 8:30 to Geneva, Thomas informed the receptionist, a blonde woman whose smile faltered when her eyes moved from Thomas to Jasmine. "And you are?" she asked Jasmine directly, ignoring the CEO badge clearly visible on her lapel. "I'm Jasmine Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Aviation. The jet is registered under my name." The receptionist's fingers clacked on her keyboard. "I'll need to see some identification." Thomas stepped forward. "That won't be necessary. MS." Montgomery's credentials were verified when she booked, its standard procedure, the receptionist interrupted, her eyes never leaving Jasmine. Jasmine silently handed over her driver's license and passport, having experienced this type of standard procedure countless times before. The receptionist scrutinized both documents, comparing the photos to Jasmine's face with obvious suspicion. "The crew is expecting Mr. Montgomery," she finally said. "There is no Mr. Montgomery," Jasmine replied evenly. "I am the owner and CEO." After several more uncomfortable minutes, they were finally escorted to the tarmac where the gleaming white jet waited. The Elite Air Services logo, a stylized golden E, adorned the tail. This was not Jasmine's permanent aircraft, she had chartered it for this specific trip while her company completed the purchase of their own jet. The lead flight attendant waited at the bottom of the stairs. Jackson Walsh was tall with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He extended his hand to Thomas. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Montgomery. We're honored to serve you today." "I'm not Mr. Montgomery," Thomas corrected. "This is Jasmine Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Aviation and your client today." Jackson's smile flickered for just a moment. Something dark flashed in his eyes before his professional mask slipped back into place. "Of course. My mistake. Welcome aboard, Ms. Montgomery." The jet's interior was immaculate, cream leather seats, polished wood tables, crystal glassware secured in custom cabinets. Jasmine settled into a seat near the front, arranging her documents on the table before her. The Geneva speech needed final revisions, and she planned to use the flight time productively. "I'd like sparkling water with lime before takeoff, please," she requested as Jackson passed by. "When I have a moment," he replied without looking at her. 15 minutes passed. The co-pilot emerged to introduce himself, nodding respectfully to both Jasmine and Thomas before returning to the cockpit. "Still no water?" Jasmine watched as Jackson served Thomas a coffee without being asked. 2 more flight attendants emerged from the galley. Allison Parker, a redhead with a tight smile, and Bryce Holloway, a man whose family resemblance to Jackson was unmistakable. Neither acknowledged Jasmine directly. "Excuse me," Jasmine called to Allison. "I asked for sparkling water some time ago." "Jackson's handling the front cabin," Allison replied before turning away. Jasmine heard the whispers as the crew huddled near the galley. "Affirmative action hire. Probably won the diversity lottery. Doesn't even look like she can afford the fuel for this thing." She'd heard variants of these comments throughout her career. Usually, she let them slide, choosing to prove her worth through her work rather than confrontation. But today, on a jet she was paying thousands of dollars to charter, her patience wore thin. Finally, Jackson approached with a glass of water, no lime, and placed it carelessly on the table. The glass tipped, spilling water across Jasmine's carefully prepared speech notes. The ink began to bleed immediately. "Oh, my mistake," Jackson said with exaggerated concern that didn't match the amusement in his eyes. Jasmine reached for napkins to blot the spreading damage. "I need to see your credentials, please." "Excuse me?" Jackson's tone sharpened. "Your professional certification and employee ID. I'll be contacting Elite Air Services Management about the service today." Jackson's face darkened. "That won't be necessary." "I disagree. And I'd like to use the phone now." Jasmine stood, moving toward the aircraft's communication system. Jackson stepped into her path. "The phone is for emergencies only. As the client who chartered this aircraft, I have the right to use the communication systems as needed." The tension in the cabin thickened. Thomas had begun recording discreetly with his phone, sensing the escalating situation. "You people always think you're entitled to special treatment," Jackson hissed, his professional veneer cracking completely. "You people." Jasmine repeated, her voice steady despite the fire building inside her. "I expect the treatment any client would receive after paying for a private charter." What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when reviewing Thomas's video, they would need to slow it down to fully capture the sequence. As Jasmine attempted to step around Jackson to reach the phone, he raised his hand and slapped her across the face with enough force to snap her head to the side. The impact split her lower lip against her teeth. "Know your place, you uppity," he spat a racial slur that silenced the entire cabin. Blood trickled down Jasmine's chin. The sting of the slap paled compared to the familiar sting of racism she'd faced all her life, just never so physically, so blatantly, with such raw hatred. For several heartbeats, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the gentle hum of the idling engines. The metallic taste of blood filled Jasmine's mouth as she pressed a white handkerchief to her split lip. The pristine cloth bloomed with crimson, a stark visual reminder of the violence that had just occurred. Jackson stood frozen, his hand still partially raised, as if he himself couldn't believe what he had done. "Thomas," Jasmine said calmly, her voice betraying none of the rage coursing through her veins, "please continue recording." Thomas nodded, his phone still discreetly capturing everything. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept the camera steady. Jackson seemed to snap back to reality, his expression shifting from shock to calculation. "I apologize for the misunderstanding. You were becoming aggressive, and I reacted instinctively to protect myself and the crew." The gaslighting began immediately. A tactic Jasmine recognized all too well. Jasmine touched her cheek where the imprint of Jackson's hand was still visible. Without a word, she returned to her seat and removed her phone from her purse. With deliberate movements, she dialed a number from memory. "Marissa. Jasmine Montgomery. I need the legal team assembled immediately." "Yes, it's an emergency." Her voice remained steady, almost conversational. "I've just been physically assaulted by a flight attendant on the Elite Air Services charter." "Yes, I'm recording now." "Blood?" "Yes, There's blood. The co-pilot emerged from the cockpit, his expression concerned but not particularly outraged. What seems to be the problem here? Your flight attendant just assaulted my client, Thomas answered, turning the phone so the co-pilot could see the video he'd captured. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, the co-pilot said, barely glancing at the footage. Jackson is our most experienced flight attendant. Perhaps tensions are running high this morning. There's no misunderstanding about a slap to the face, Jasmine replied, lowering her bloodied handkerchief to reveal her swollen lip. The co-pilot shifted uncomfortably. Let's all take a moment to calm down. I'm sure we can resolve this without escalating further. By escalating, do you mean reporting an assault? Because that's not escalation, that's the appropriate response. Jasmine's tone remained measured, though her eyes blazed. Allison and Bryce had moved to flank Jackson, their body language defensive. Jasmine noticed how they positioned themselves, a united front. This wasn't just colleagues supporting each other. There was something more familiar in their dynamic. How long have you all worked together? Jasmine asked suddenly. The question seemed to catch them off guard. Jackson and I are brothers, Bryce admitted. Allison is his fiancée. We've been with Elite for 8 years. And the co-pilot? What's your connection? The co-pilot hesitated. Jackson's uncle. The captain is not related, he added quickly. A family business, then, Jasmine noted. Interesting. While they talked, her phone buzzed with incoming messages. Thomas handed her a tablet, open to Elite Air Services' internal database. As Montgomery Aviation's head of acquisitions, he had been granted access during their recent negotiations the crew clearly knew nothing about. Jasmine scrolled through the complaint records, finding exactly what she suspected. Multiple reports of service issues from minority clients, all handled by this same crew. All dismissed without investigation. All buried in the system where clients couldn't see them during the vetting process. 3 complaints of racial discrimination in the past year alone, Jasmine said, turning the tablet so they could see. All mysteriously resolved with no action taken. Jackson's face paled. You don't have authorization to access those records. Actually, I do. Jasmine handed the tablet back to Thomas, who continued digging deeper into the company's files. Ms. Montgomery, Jackson attempted a conciliatory tone, perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I apologize if you felt disrespected. Why don't we start fresh? I'm sure we can make the rest of your journey pleasant. The journey isn't happening, Jasmine replied. Not with this crew. You can't just cancel a flight minutes before departure, the co-pilot protested. There are protocols, fees, I'm aware of the contractual obligations, Jasmine interrupted. Section 8, Paragraph 3 of the Elite Air Services Charter Agreement states that clients may terminate service without penalty in cases of crew misconduct or client safety concerns. I'd say assault qualifies. Thomas's continued searching had yielded another disturbing discovery. Jasmine, he said quietly, the Walsh family owns 30% of Elite Air Services. Jackson's father is on the board. That explains the buried complaints, Jasmine murmured. Her phone buzzed again, a message from her acquisition team confirming what she needed to know. The timing was perfect, almost poetic in its justice. She allowed herself a small smile despite her throbbing lip. What's so amusing? Jackson demanded, his temporary contrition evaporating. The universe has a remarkable sense of timing, Jasmine replied. She typed a quick message to her executive team, setting her plan in motion while maintaining perfect composure. The flight attendants exchanged nervous glances as Jasmine continued to calmly handle communications on her phone, occasionally dabbing at her lip with the bloodied handkerchief. They had expected tears, hysteria, or capitulation, reactions they'd seen before when they'd pushed boundaries with other minority clients. Jasmine's controlled response unsettled them more than outrage would have. Thomas, Please verify the jet's security camera coverage, Jasmine requested. Already done, he replied. For cameras in the cabin, all recording to the onboard system and backing up to cloud storage. Everything from the moment we boarded is documented. This information visibly disturbed the crew. Jackson whispered something to his brother, who disappeared toward the rear of the aircraft. If he's attempting to access the camera system, please inform him that tampering with safety equipment is a federal offense, Jasmine called out, not even turning around. Additionally, our legal team is already downloading the backup footage from the cloud server. Bryce reappeared, shaking his head slightly at Jackson. The backup system was beyond their reach. Jasmine checked her watch. Exactly 9 minutes had passed since the slap. Her phone chimed with a final confirmation message. Perfect timing, she said softly, rising from her seat once more. 10 minutes after Jackson's palm had connected with her face, Jasmine stood in the center of the cabin, blood still visible at the corner of her mouth. Her posture was straight, her chin lifted, her eyes clear and focused. Power radiated from her in palpable waves. I want everyone's attention, she announced, her voice carrying the authority that had helped her build a multi-billion-dollar company from nothing. There's something you should know about today's flight. The crew had clustered together near the galley, a defensive formation with Jackson at the center. The co-pilot stood halfway between them and the cockpit, uncertain which side to take in the escalating situation. This morning at 7:32, exactly 58 minutes before I arrived at this terminal, Montgomery Aviation completed the acquisition of Elite Air Services, Jasmine stated, holding up her phone to display the signed final agreement. The paperwork was finalized and filed with the SEC. The company now operates as a wholly owned subsidiary of Montgomery Aviation. The blood drained from Jackson's face. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's done, Thomas confirmed, displaying the official documents on his tablet. Ms. Montgomery is now effectively your employer. The stillness that followed was absolute. Even the ambient sounds of the aircraft seemed to fade away as the implications sank in. As my first official act as CEO of both companies, Jasmine continued, I am terminating the employment of everyone currently on this aircraft service team, effective immediately. Allison gasped. Bryce gripped the back of a seat to steady himself. Jackson's shock transformed into outrage. You can't do that. My father is on the board. Jackson protested. Was on the board, Jasmine corrected. The acquisition agreement included a full restructuring of leadership. Your father was given a generous severance package in exchange for his shares and immediate resignation. Jackson lunged forward, but Thomas stepped between them. I wouldn't, he warned quietly. Assaulting her once was stupid enough. A second time would be career suicide and probably land you in jail. You set this up, Jackson accused, his voice shaking with rage. You provoked me intentionally. Jasmine shook her head. I didn't need to provoke you. Your prejudice did that all on its own. The acquisition has been in negotiation for months. I had no idea I'd be dealing with this level of unprofessionalism today. She turned to address everyone. For years, I've heard rumors about Elite Air Services' treatment of minority clients. As I considered acquiring the company, I reviewed customer satisfaction data and noticed a pattern. Clients of color consistently reported lower satisfaction scores, but those complaints never seemed to result in any changes. Now I understand why. Thomas handed her another tablet. The termination documents are prepared, requiring only your authorization. Jasmine signed the digital forms with a stylus, her signature flowing across the screen with practiced ease. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings and vacate company property. Security will escort you from the premises. You'll regret this, Jackson snarled. My family has connections throughout the industry. You have no idea who you're messing with. Actually, I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Jasmine replied calmly. A man who believed his privilege and connections would shield him from consequences. They won't. Not anymore. She touched her phone's screen. I've just authorized a replacement crew from Aerostaff Services. They'll arrive within the hour, and my journey will continue as planned. The cockpit door opened, and the captain emerged, alarmed by the commotion. What's happening out here? Captain, Jasmine addressed him directly, are you related to any member of this crew? No, ma'am, he replied, confused. Good. You and the co-pilot will remain employed pending a review of your performance records and this incident. For now, please return to the cockpit and prepare for a crew change. The captain hesitated, looking between Jasmine and the flight attendants. Captain, Jasmine added, I should mention that I am now your employer, and this is a direct instruction. Understanding dawned on his face. He nodded sharply and returned to the cockpit, the co-pilot following after a moment's hesitation. Jackson's hands clenched into fists. This is reverse discrimination. We'll sue for wrongful termination. Please do, Jasmine replied. I welcome the opportunity to present the security footage in court. I'm sure a jury will be very interested in your use of racial slurs and physical violence against a client. Security personnel from the private terminal appeared at the aircraft door, summoned by Thomas's earlier call. These individuals are being removed from company property, Thomas informed them. Please ensure they leave without further incident. As the reality of their situation became undeniable, the flight attendants gathered their belongings in stunned silence. Jackson continued to mutter threats under his breath, but his bravado had deflated considerably. Before they left, Jasmine had one final message. The aviation industry has a diversity problem. That changes today, starting with this company. What happened here isn't just about one slap or one racial slur, it's about a systemic issue that has gone unchallenged for too long. That ends now. As the security team escorted the former crew down the jet stairs, Jasmine turned to the viewers. What would you have done in my position? Would you have fired the entire crew or just Jackson? Comment number 1 if you think the whole crew deserved to be fired for enabling this behavior. Comment number 2 if you think only Jackson should have faced consequences. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in accountability, and subscribe to see how this story unfolds. But what Jackson and his crew didn't realize was that their troubles were only beginning. How would the aviation industry react to this incident? And what would happen when the powerful Walsh family decided to strike back? The corporate backlash was about to begin. News travels at supersonic speed in the business world, especially when it involves billion-dollar companies and explosive allegations of discrimination. By the time Jasmine's replacement crew arrived and her jet finally lifted off for Geneva, aviation industry insiders were already buzzing with versions of what had happened. Most of these early accounts painted Jasmine as the aggressor. A power-hungry executive who had engineered a hostile takeover and fired loyal employees on a vindictive whim. The Walsh family's connections were working overtime to control the narrative. Jasmine spent the flight across the Atlantic reviewing the security footage with her legal team via secure video conference. The unedited video left no doubt about what had transpired. Jackson's unprovoked assault and racial slur were clearly captured from multiple angles. The dismissive treatment she received before the slap was equally evident, the spilled water, the ignored requests, the whispered comments just loud enough for her to hear. Release the footage, she instructed her communications director. No edits, no commentary. Just the raw video with appropriate content warnings for language and violence. Are you sure? Her communications director asked. It might be more strategic to hold it back until the Walshes make their move. Transparency is our best strategy, Jasmine replied. We have truth on our side. Let them try to explain that footage away. While Jasmine was still airborne, an emergency board meeting of Elite Air Services remaining executives convened in Chicago. The acquisition had been kept confidential even from most senior managers until the final signatures were in place. Now they were scrambling to understand what their company's new leadership structure would look like. And whether they would still have jobs by day's end. Simultaneously, Harold Walsh, Jackson's father and former board member, was holding a meeting of his own at his Lake Forest mansion. Present were several major players in the aviation industry, including executives from competing charter services, aircraft manufacturers, and aviation insurance companies. All had long-standing relationships with the Walsh family. All had benefited from the old boys network that had dominated aviation for decades. "She blindsided us," Harold fumed, pacing across his mahogany-paneled study. "Used underhanded tactics to gain control, then immediately started purging loyal employees." "Did Jackson really hit her?" asked Catherine Blackwood, CEO of Pinnacle Aircraft Leasing. "The rumors are all over the industry forums." Harold waved dismissively. Even if there was contact, it was clearly defensive. This Montgomery woman was becoming hysterical, making unreasonable demands. Jackson was protecting himself and the aircraft. "That's not what the video shows," said William Mercer, a usually quiet executive from an aviation insurance firm. He held up his tablet, which displayed the security footage Jasmine had already released. "This is problematic, Harold. Very problematic." The room fell silent as they watched Jackson slap Jasmine and spit the racial slur. Even with their inherent biases, they couldn't deny the evidence before their eyes. "It's been edited," Harold declared desperately. "Manipulated to remove her provocations. It's time-stamped continuous footage from multiple camera angles," William replied. "My security team confirmed its authenticity. This isn't something we can spin away." "Then we discredit her," Harold insisted. Montgomery Aviation stock dropped 2 points after the news broke. "We push it further. Suggest she's unstable, that her company is on shaky financial ground. Create enough doubt that investors get nervous. That could backfire spectacularly," Catherine warned. "Montgomery Aviation has solid fundamentals. Their government contracts alone ensure stability." "Then we hit her personally," Harold said, his voice hardening. "Everyone has skeletons. Find hers." While the aviation old guard plotted, another force was gathering momentum. Former Elite Air Services employees began coming forward with their own stories of discrimination within the company. A black pilot who had been repeatedly passed over for promotion despite exemplary performance records. A Hispanic flight attendant who had been fired after complaining about racist comments from colleagues. An Asian mechanic who had been consistently assigned the least desirable shifts. They shared their stories on social media, creating a hashtag that quickly began trending. #EliteExposed. Each account reinforced a pattern of systematic discrimination that had been protected and perpetuated by management, particularly by the Walsh family. Former clients joined the chorus. A famous black musician described being treated with suspicion and disdain on his chartered flights. A South Asian tech CEO shared emails showing he had been charged higher rates than his white counterparts for identical services. A Latino sports star recounted how flight attendants had followed him constantly during his flight, apparently suspecting he might steal from the aircraft. The court of public opinion was beginning to shift, but the corporate world remained divided. Several of Montgomery Aviation's competitors issued statements supporting the Walsh family, suggesting that Jasmine had overreacted to a minor service issue. Some threatened to cancel contracts with Montgomery's engine division unless she reconsidered her hasty decision. A boycott movement materialized, with several corporations announcing they would no longer use Montgomery Aviation services or products. The company's stock dropped another 3 points by the end of the trading day. Jasmine's inbox filled with messages from industry colleagues. Some offered support, but many expressed disappointment in her divisive actions and lack of professionalism. Reading between the lines, the message was clear: you're making waves in a pond that prefers stillness. You're disrupting a system that has served us well. You're making us uncomfortable. In Geneva, Jasmine checked into her hotel suite and finally allowed herself a moment alone. She examined her face in the bathroom mirror. The swelling had subsided somewhat, but her lip remained discolored and tender. She touched it gently, wincing at the pain. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Had she gone too far? Should she have fired only Jackson and left the others with warnings? Was she jeopardizing everything she built by taking such a firm stand? Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Thomas. "You need to see this," he said without preamble. "The Walshes are playing hardball. They've planted a story claiming you've been cooking Montgomery Aviation's books. They're suggesting the elite acquisition was a desperate move to hide financial irregularities." Jasmine closed her eyes briefly. "They're trying to trigger an SEC investigation." "Yes. And they've partially succeeded. The SEC has requested some preliminary documents." "Send everything they need," Jasmine instructed. "Our financials are impeccable. This will backfire on them." "There's more," Thomas continued. "Your keynote address for tomorrow? They're pressuring the conference organizers to rescind your invitation, claiming you're too controversial for now. And the organizers are standing firm for now, but they're getting nervous. Several sponsors have threatened to pull out if you speak." Jasmine considered this information. The keynote was crucial for announcing Montgomery Aviation's expansion into commercial aircraft. Delaying the announcement could cost them significant momentum in the market. "Book a press conference for this evening," she decided. "We're taking control of this narrative. And send the unedited footage to every major news outlet. It's time to go public beyond aviation circles." As she ended the call, another notification appeared on her screen. Montgomery Aviation's stock had dropped another point. The market was responding to the rumors, just as the Walshes had intended. The corporate backlash was hitting her company's value, threatening years of work and the livelihoods of thousands of employees who depended on Montgomery Aviation's success. The stakes had just risen exponentially. But as Jasmine prepared for battle, she didn't know that the Walshes' counterattack was just beginning, and that the coming days would test her resolve in ways far more personal and dangerous than stock prices or corporate politics. The Geneva press conference had gone better than expected. Standing before a forest of microphones in the hotel's grand ballroom, Jasmine presented her case with calm dignity. The bruise on her face told part of the story, the security footage, played on large screens behind her, told the rest. International media, less entangled with aviation industry power players than their American counterparts, reported the incident with relative objectivity. By midnight, social media sentiment had shifted dramatically in Jasmine's favor. The hashtag #IStandWithJasmine was trending globally, overwhelmingly drowning out the Walsh-sponsored #MontyGate scandal attempt. Montgomery Aviation stock had stabilized, even regaining half a point in after-hours trading. But as Jasmine finally retired to her hotel suite, the adrenaline that had carried her through the day ebbed away, leaving raw emotion in its wake. Alone for the first time since the assault, she allowed herself to feel the full impact of what had happened. Her hands trembled as she removed her makeup, revealing the full extent of the bruising. The physical pain was minimal now, just a dull throb where Jackson's hand had connected with her face. The deeper wound was psychological, reopening scars from a lifetime of similar indignities, most of which she had been forced to swallow silently for the sake of her career. Jasmine sank onto the edge of the bathtub, suddenly overwhelmed. A sob escaped her throat, then another. She cried not just for today's humiliation but for all the times she'd been dismissed, underestimated, insulted, and denied because of her skin color. For all the times she'd maintained a perfect professional facade while screaming inside. Her phone chimed with an incoming text. Wiping her eyes, she checked the message from her head of security. Additional measures in place per your request. All teams on high alert. Below this was a forwarded email that had been sent to Montgomery Aviation's general contact address. The subject line read, "Race traitor bitch will pay." The content was worse, graphic descriptions of violence interspersed with racial slurs and misogynistic language. It wasn't the first death threat she'd received since founding Montgomery Aviation. As a black woman in a position of power, she'd become accustomed to such messages, especially after high-profile successes. But this one felt different, more immediate, more specific in its threats. Jasmine forwarded the email to her security team with a simple instruction: add to the file for FBI. Sleep eluded her that night. She lay awake, mind racing between doubt and determination. Had she made the right decision in firing the entire crew rather than just Jackson? The others hadn't slapped her, hadn't used slurs, at least not audibly. But they had enabled Jackson, had participated in the subtle discriminatory treatment that preceded the assault. They were part of the system that protected people like Jackson from consequences. Still, she had ended their careers in an instant. Was that justice or an abuse of her newly acquired power? Her phone rang at 3 in the morning. It was Aaron, her fiancé, calling from Chicago. "I just saw the footage," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Why didn't you call me immediately?" "I had to handle it," Jasmine replied. "Everything moved so quickly. You should have told me." "I had to find out from the news, Jazz." "The news?" "I'm sorry. I was focused on containing the situation." "Containing?" Aaron cut himself off. "You were assaulted. This isn't a PR crisis to manage. It's a crime committed against my future wife." "It's both," Jasmine said softly. "Everything I do is both personal and professional. You know that." A heavy silence fell between them. Aaron, a renowned neurosurgeon, understood professional pressure. But as a white man, he couldn't fully comprehend the additional burdens Jasmine carried. "I'm worried about you," he finally said. "These threats coming in, they're serious, Jazz. The FBI called me trying to reach you." "What? Why?" "They're monitoring chatter in some extremist forums. Your name is coming up in concerning ways. They want to assign a protective detail." Jasmine closed her eyes. Another invasion of her privacy, another adjustment to her life, another cost of standing up for herself. "I'll call them in the morning," she promised. "No, you'll call them now," Aaron insisted. "This isn't something to put off." After finishing the call with Aaron and then speaking with an FBI agent, Jasmine finally drifted into a restless sleep, only to be awakened at dawn by a call from Thomas. "We have a problem," he said, his voice unusually tense. Montgomery stock dropped 12 points in pre-market trading. 12. Jasmine sat up, instantly alert. "That's not possible." The press conference stabilized things. "It's not about the Walsh situation, at least not directly." 3 major institutional investors dumped their shares simultaneously. "It looks coordinated." "Who?" Thomas named 3 investment firms, all with connections to Harold Walsh's social circle. "They're trying to tank our stock," Jasmine realized. "Create a panic that forces other investors to sell." "It's working," Thomas confirmed grimly. "Smaller shareholders are following suit. At this rate, we could lose 30% of our market value by closing bell." "Call an emergency board meeting," Jasmine instructed. "And get me the CEOs of those investment firms on the phone. I want to know what pressure Walsh put on them." She was still on calls when her parents phoned. The story had made national news in America, their worried voices informed her. Their neighbors were asking questions. Strangers had gathered outside their modest Chicago home, some with cameras, others with signs bearing slogans both supportive and hateful. "We're fine, baby," her mother assured her. "Your father installed that security system you bought us last Christmas. But we're worried about you." "I'm okay, Mom," Jasmine lied, not wanting to add to their concerns. "We saw what that man did to you," her father said, his voice breaking slightly. No father should have to see his child treated that way. The pain in his voice nearly undid her. Her parents had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities, had coached her through the racism she would face, had celebrated her triumphs and comforted her after setbacks. Hearing her father's anguish made her question again whether the stand she'd taken was worth the collateral damage to those she loved. By midday, more concerning news arrived. Several members of Montgomery Aviation's executive team had expressed reservations about her handling of the situation. One board member had given an anonymous quote to an industry publication suggesting Jasmine had acted emotionally rather than strategically, and had potentially damaged shareholder value with her personal vendetta. The subtext was clear: as a black woman, she was being characterized as angry and irrational rather than principled and decisive. It was a familiar tactic, one she had navigated throughout her career, but it stung coming from people she had believed to be allies. Her keynote address at the aviation conference that afternoon was delivered to a packed auditorium. Security was visibly heightened, with guards stationed throughout the venue. Jasmine presented Montgomery Aviation's expansion plans with her usual eloquence and vision, making no direct reference to the previous day's events. The split lip and facial bruising, still visible despite professional makeup, spoke for themselves. The audience response was politely enthusiastic but noticeably reserved. In the networking reception afterward, Jasmine found herself isolated, standing alone while industry executives who had eagerly sought her attention at previous events now gave her a wide berth. No one wanted to be seen taking sides, at least not publicly. As she prepared to return to her hotel, an older black woman approached her, introducing herself as the widow of a pioneering African-American pilot. "They did the same to my Harold," the woman said, grasping Jasmine's hand tightly. "Pushed him out when he complained about discrimination. That was 30 years ago, and nothing's changed. Until now, perhaps. Because of you." The woman pressed something into Jasmine's palm, a pilot's wings pin, tarnished with age. "He would have wanted you to have these. Stand firm, child. You're not just fighting for yourself." The encounter left Jasmine with a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that her actions resonated beyond her personal experience or even her company's bottom line. She represented hope for change in an industry that had resisted it for generations. Back in her hotel room, she found a delivered package waiting. Security had already screened it and found it safe. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing a printed message: "Next time IT won't be just a slap." Jasmine stared at the threat, feeling not fear but a deep, cold anger. The Walshes and their allies were escalating, attempting to intimidate her into backing down. They still didn't understand who they were dealing with. She had built Montgomery Aviation from nothing, overcoming obstacles these privileged men couldn't begin to imagine. She had faced discrimination, rejection, and mockery at every stage. She had been underestimated her entire life. That had always been her opponent's fatal mistake. As night fell over Geneva, Jasmine made two decisions. First, she would not retreat from this fight, regardless of the personal cost. Second, it was time to stop playing defense. The Walshes had brought the battle to her. Now she would bring the war to them. The lawsuit landed on Jasmine's desk 3 days after her return to Chicago. Jackson Walsh and the other fired crew members were suing for wrongful termination, seeking $20 million in damages and reinstatement to their positions. The filing painted Jasmine as an unstable, power-hungry executive who had orchestrated the entire incident as an excuse to fire white employees and replace them with unqualified minorities. More disturbing than the lawsuit itself was the media campaign that accompanied it. Coordinated interviews with the fired crew appeared simultaneously across multiple platforms. A tearful Allison described feeling terrified of Jasmine's volatile behavior. Bryce claimed he had seen her verbally abuse other service workers before the incident. Jackson, playing the role of remorseful victim, admitted to reacting inappropriately but insisted he had been provoked by Jasmine's threatening actions. Their performances were convincing. Sympathy pieces appeared in several publications, questioning whether cancel culture had gone too far in destroying the careers of dedicated aviation professionals over a momentary lapse in judgment. Public opinion, which had initially shifted in Jasmine's favor after the security footage release, began to fracture again. The Walsh family's connections in media were proving valuable, creating just enough doubt to complicate the narrative. They're gaining traction, Thomas observed grimly, dropping a stack of news clippings on Jasmine's desk. The stories evolving from racist flight attendant assaults black CEO to privileged executive ruins working-class lives over misunderstanding. Class warfare, Jasmine noted. Clever. They're trying to make this about wealth rather than race. It's working with certain demographics, Thomas confirmed. Our social media metrics showed declining support among working-class whites who initially backed you. Jasmine studied the reports, noting the subtle shift in language across multiple outlets. The coordination was impressive and concerning. Someone was orchestrating this campaign with sophisticated understanding of media dynamics. A knock at her office door interrupted her analysis. Aaron entered, accompanied by Jasmine's head of security. Their expression sent a chill through her. There's been a breach, Aaron said without preamble. Someone broke into our home last night. Jasmine stood, alarmed. What? When? Between 2 and 4 a.m., the security chief explained. The system was disabled professionally. Nothing appears to be stolen, but... But what? Aaron handed her his phone, displaying a photograph. Their bedroom had been entered. On Jasmine's pillow lay a doll with dark skin, a red line drawn across its face where her bruise had been. A miniature noose was tied around its neck. The FBI has been notified, the security chief continued. They're treating this as a hate crime and a serious threat. Jasmine stared at the image, ice forming in her veins. The message was unmistakable. We're not staying there again, Aaron stated firmly. I've booked us into a hotel under my brother's name until security can be upgraded at the house. Jasmine nodded, still processing the escalation. The threats had moved from anonymous messages to physical invasion of her home. The Walshes, or someone connected to them, were sending a clear message: we know where you live. We can reach you anytime. What about my parents? She asked suddenly. Already handled, the security chief assured her. We've relocated them to a secure location and doubled their protection detail. The violation of her home hardened Jasmine's resolve. That evening, she called an emergency meeting with her inner circle, Thomas, her legal team, her head of communications, and a new addition, Vanessa Diaz, a renowned civil rights attorney known for taking on powerful corporations. We've been playing defense, Jasmine told them. That changes tonight. Vanessa, prepare a countersuit against Jackson Walsh for assault, battery, and civil rights violations. Name Elite Air Services as a co-defendant for creating a hostile environment and failing to properly train and supervise their employees. What about the other crew members? Thomas asked. Include them as co-defendants, Jasmine decided. They were complicit in the discrimination, even if they didn't physically assault me. The damages? Vanessa inquired, taking notes. $50 million, with all proceeds to be donated to organizations supporting minorities in aviation. Vanessa nodded approvingly. Making it clear this isn't about money. Smart. Next, Jasmine continued, I want a complete audit of Elite Air Services hiring practices, promotion patterns, and complaint history. Thomas, pulled together a team to go through every record dating back 10 years. Already started, Thomas confirmed. Preliminary findings suggest systematic discrimination against minority applicants and employees. Less than 3% of their workforce is non-white, in an industry that averages 12%. Document everything. We'll need it for both the lawsuit and potential regulatory investigations. Jasmine turned to her communications director. Find former elite clients who experienced discrimination. Create a secure platform for them to share their stories if they're willing. Offer anonymity for those concerned about industry backlash. The strategy took shape rapidly. While the Walsh family had connections and influence, Jasmine had resources they couldn't match, a corporate infrastructure, dedicated legal teams, and most importantly, the truth documented on video. Within 48 hours, the counteroffensive began producing results. 27 former elite clients came forward with documented cases of discriminatory treatment. 15 former employees provided sworn statements about racist practices within the company. The pattern was undeniable and damning. Most significantly, an anonymous source within Elite, a mid-level manager troubled by the company's practices, provided internal emails that proved Jackson Walsh had been the subject of multiple discrimination complaints that had been deliberately buried by management. Several emails from Harold Walsh himself directed human resources to handle the situation discreetly and ensure no paper trail. The evidence was explosive. Jasmine's legal team filed the countersuit with supporting documentation so compelling that legal analysts unanimously predicted a swift victory if the case went to trial. But the Walsh family had one more card to play. William Harris, a board member of Montgomery Aviation and longtime friend of Harold Walsh, had been secretly feeding information to the Walsh camp since the incident began. Now, he made his move. At an emergency board meeting called to discuss the lawsuits, Harris launched a direct challenge to Jasmine's leadership. "The board has serious concerns about your handling of this situation," he announced, several other members nodding in agreement. Montgomery Aviation stock has dropped 18%. Major clients are threatening to cancel contracts. Your personal vendetta against the Walsh family is damaging shareholder value. Personal vendetta? Jasmine repeated incredulously. "I was physically assaulted and called a racial slur. That's not a vendetta, that's standing up against discrimination and violence." "Nobody denies the incident was unfortunate," Harris replied smoothly. "But your response has been disproportionate and emotionally driven. The board believes a more measured approach would better serve the company's interests." "What exactly are you suggesting, William?" Harris slid a document across the table. "A resolution to separate the roles of CEO and chairperson, with you remaining as chairperson while we appoint a new CEO to handle day-to-day operations during this sensitive period." It was a power play designed to sideline her while maintaining the appearance of respect for her position as founder. Several board members avoided her gaze, their discomfort evident but their courage lacking. Jasmine read the document carefully, noting the signatures already collected. They had been planning this move for days, perhaps longer. "Before we vote," she said calmly, "there's something the board should know." She nodded to Thomas, who distributed folders to each member. "These documents detail William Harris's communications with Harold Walsh over the past 2 weeks. They include confidential board discussions, proprietary company information, and strategy documents related to our legal defense." Harris's face drained of color. "That's preposterous. You're inventing." "Digital forensics don't lie, William," Jasmine interrupted. "Every email, text, and phone call is documented. You've been feeding information to someone actively working to damage this company." The room fell silent as board members reviewed the evidence. Harris stammered denials that grew weaker as the proof mounted. "This constitutes a clear breach of fiduciary duty," Jasmine continued. "Under our bylaws, it's grounds for immediate removal from the board." She looked around the table, meeting each member's eyes in turn. "We can vote on that now, or William can submit his resignation effective immediately. Either way, he leaves this room no longer a member of this board." Harris glared at her, hatred plain on his face. "You think you've won? This isn't over. The Walshes have deeper connections than you can imagine." "I'm counting on it," Jasmine replied evenly. "Because before this is over, everyone will know exactly who they are and what they represent." Harris stormed out, leaving the resolution to remove Jasmine as CEO unsigned and abandoned. The remaining board members, seeing which way the wind was blowing, unanimously voted to support Jasmine's leadership and legal strategy. As the meeting concluded, Jasmine's phone buzzed with an urgent message. The anonymous source inside Elite Air Services had provided something new. Evidence that Jackson's father had attempted to bribe potential witnesses to change their testimony against his son. The counterattack had just gained new momentum. The Walshes had tried to use their power and connections to destroy her. Now those same weapons would be turned against them. The lawsuit expanded like a supernova, its gravitational pull drawing in far more than just Jackson Walsh and his immediate crew. What began as a case focused on a single assault transformed into a class action representing dozens of victims of discrimination throughout the aviation industry. Former employees from not just Elite Air Services but major airlines, charter companies, maintenance facilities, and even regulatory bodies came forward with similar stories. Black pilots denied promotions despite perfect records. Hispanic mechanics relegated to graveyard shifts regardless of seniority. Asian flight attendants subjected to racist jokes and stereotyping by supervisors who faced no consequences. Each story reinforced the others, creating a tapestry of systematic discrimination too compelling to dismiss. Law firms specializing in employment discrimination joined Vanessa Diaz's team, contributing resources and expertise to what was rapidly becoming a landmark case. The industry's initial dismissal of the incident as an isolated occurrence became untenable as evidence mounted. Aviation trade publications began running investigative pieces on diversity statistics across the sector. The numbers told a damning story. Despite decades of alleged commitment to inclusion, the upper echelons of aviation remained overwhelmingly white and male. Jasmine found herself at the center of a movement she hadn't intended to create but embraced as necessary. Her scheduled testimony before the House Transportation Committee about aviation fuel efficiency standards was expanded to include questions about industry discrimination. The hearing room was packed, cameras broadcasting her appearance live across multiple networks. Dressed in a crisp white suit that contrasted deliberately with the sea of dark suits on the committee dais, Jasmine presented data, shared stories from other victims, and finally, spoke from her own experience. "When that flight attendant slapped me," she testified, her voice steady, "he didn't see Jasmine Montgomery, CEO of a billion-dollar company. He didn't see an aerospace engineer with multiple patents. He didn't see a human being deserving of basic respect. He saw only my skin color, and decided that alone made me unworthy of dignity." She paused, allowing her words to resonate through the silent chamber. But this isn't about one man's actions or my individual experience. It's about an industry culture that enabled his behavior, buried complaints, and punished those who spoke up. It's about systems designed to preserve privilege rather than promote excellence. A committee member interrupted, "Ms. Montgomery, while your experience was clearly unacceptable, isn't it possible you're extrapolating too broadly from a single incident?" "Respectfully, Congressman, this was not a single incident," Jasmine replied. "Since filing our lawsuit, we've documented over 300 similar cases across 42 companies in the aviation sector. This isn't anecdotal, it's systemic." Her testimony concluded with a challenge that would become the rallying cry of the movement: excellence is colorblind. Talent has no race. Innovation doesn't check a gender box. Until our industry truly embraces these truths, we will continue to waste our greatest resource, human potential. The speech went viral, clips spreading across social media platforms and generating millions of views within hours. #ExcellenceIs colorblind began trending globally. Industry leaders found themselves forced to respond, issuing statements affirming commitment to diversity and promising reviews of internal practices. Behind closed doors, however, resistance remained fierce. Harold Walsh mobilized his considerable resources to fight back. His strategy shifted from attacking Jasmine directly to undermining the credibility of those who supported her. Key witnesses in the lawsuit reported strange occurrences, unexpected IRS audits, old legal troubles suddenly resurfacing, job offers mysteriously rescinded. Several withdrew their testimony, citing personal reasons that they refused to elaborate on. The pattern became clear enough that the FBI opened an investigation into witness tampering. Agents interviewed former employees who admitted being offered substantial sums to change their stories or remember details differently. The investigation led to Harold Walsh's longtime lawyer, who had coordinated the payments through a network of shell companies. When confronted with evidence of financial transfers, the lawyer agreed to cooperate in exchange for leniency, providing documents that implicated Harold directly in the scheme. As legal pressure mounted, fractures appeared in the once unified front of industry executives who had supported the Walshes. Companies began settling discrimination claims quietly rather than risk the public scrutiny of a trial. Some implemented new diversity initiatives and training programs, eager to demonstrate their commitment to change. Montgomery Aviation, meanwhile, underwent its own transformation. Jasmine established a foundation dedicated to supporting minorities in aviation, funding scholarships, mentorship programs, and legal aid for discrimination cases. The initiative, funded initially with $10 million of her personal wealth, attracted matching donations from companies eager to position themselves on the right side of the industry's reckoning. The foundation's first major project was a comprehensive study of hiring, promotion, and retention patterns across the aviation sector. The resulting report, grounded by bias, provided irrefutable statistical evidence of discrimination at every level, from entry-level positions to executive suites. The industry divided into two camps, those embracing change and those resisting it. Montgomery Aviation stock, which had suffered initially, began a steady climb as the company's commitment to excellence regardless of race or gender attracted top talent from competitors. Several major clients who had threatened to cancel contracts not only renewed but expanded their business relationships, citing the company's leadership in addressing industry-wide issues. Public opinion, too, shifted decisively in Jasmine's favor as more details emerged about the Walsh family's history of discriminatory practices and their aggressive attempts to silence critics. Consumer boycotts targeted companies that continued to do business with Walsh-affiliated enterprises, creating financial pressure that even the most resistant executives couldn't ignore. 10 months after the incident on her private jet, Jasmine took the stage at the International Aviation Conference. The same event she had been traveling to when Jackson Walsh assaulted her. This time, she wasn't just a keynote speaker but the recipient of the industry's highest honor, the Aviation Leadership Award, recognizing individuals who had fundamentally changed the sector for the better. Standing before her peers, many of whom had initially distanced themselves from her fight, Jasmine accepted the award not as personal vindication but as recognition of a movement larger than herself. "This award belongs to every person who had the courage to speak truth to power," she said. "To every employee who filed a complaint knowing it might cost them their job. To every client who refused service from companies with discriminatory practices. To every executive who chose to be part of the solution rather than defending the status quo." She concluded with words that would be inscribed on plaques in aviation schools and corporate headquarters across the country. The sky belongs to everyone. It's time our industry reflected that truth. As Jasmine left the stage to thunderous applause, her phone buzzed with a message from her legal team. The judge in the class action lawsuit had rejected the final appeal from the Walsh legal team. The case would proceed to trial, unless the defendants agreed to the comprehensive settlement terms Jasmine's team had proposed. Those terms went far beyond monetary compensation. They required industry-wide anti-discrimination training, transparent reporting of diversity metrics, independent oversight of hiring and promotion practices, and protection for whistleblowers who reported violations. It was a watershed moment for an industry that had resisted change for generations. And it had begun with a single slap on a private jet, a moment of violence that had unleashed a long overdue reckoning. 1 year to the day after Jackson Walsh's hand struck Jasmine Montgomery's face, the federal judge rendered her final decision in the landmark discrimination case that had transformed the aviation industry. The courtroom was packed, with overflow crowds watching on monitors in adjacent rooms. News cameras lined the back wall, ready to broadcast the verdict to a nation that had followed the case with increasing interest. In the matter of Montgomery et al. Versus Walsh et al. Judge Elena Rodriguez began, this court finds overwhelmingly in favor of the plaintiffs. A collective exhalation swept through the room. Jasmine, seated beside Vanessa Diaz at the plaintiff's table, maintained her composure despite the emotions surging within her. This wasn't just her victory, it belonged to the hundreds who had joined the class action, the thousands who had suffered similar discrimination, and the millions who would benefit from the changes this ruling would enforce. Judge Rodriguez continued, outlining the court's findings: systemic discrimination throughout Elite Air Services and multiple other companies, deliberate burial of complaints, retaliatory actions against employees who reported violations, and direct involvement of senior executives, including Harold Walsh, in perpetuating discriminatory practices. The judgment was comprehensive and unprecedented. Financial damages totaled over $300 million, but more significant were the mandatory reforms. This court orders the implementation of comprehensive anti-discrimination training across all defendant companies, to be designed by independent experts and renewed annually. All defendants must establish transparent reporting of diversity metrics, with quarterly public disclosure of hiring, promotion, and retention statistics broken down by race, gender, and other protected categories. An independent oversight committee will monitor compliance with these orders for a period of not less than 10 years, with authority to conduct unannounced audits and interviews at any defendant location. Strong whistleblower protections must be established, including anonymous reporting channels and prohibitions against retaliation, with significant penalties for violations. Most shocking to industry insiders was the judge's direct ruling on Jackson Walsh and his father, due to the overwhelming evidence of assault, discrimination, and subsequent witness tampering. This court refers the actions of Jackson Walsh and Harold Walsh to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. As the judge concluded, Jasmine glanced across the courtroom at Jackson Walsh. Gone was the arrogant smirk he had worn that day on the aircraft. His face was ashen, his posture defeated. Beside him, Harold Walsh stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable as his carefully constructed world of privilege and protection crumbled around him. Outside the courthouse, Jasmine addressed the waiting media, flanked by dozens of class action participants representing the diversity the aviation industry had long suppressed. "Today's ruling isn't the end of our journey, it's the beginning," she stated. "Real change doesn't happen through court orders alone. It happens through daily commitment to creating workplaces where everyone is judged by the quality of their work, not the color of their skin or the gender on their ID." In the weeks following the verdict, the impact rippled throughout the industry. Companies not named in the lawsuit voluntarily adopted similar reforms, recognizing that the legal and reputational risks of maintaining discriminatory practices had become too great. Industry associations established new standards for inclusion and equity, with certification programs that consumers and corporate clients increasingly demanded before doing business. Elite Air Services, now fully integrated into Montgomery Aviation, underwent a complete transformation. Jasmine appointed Keisha Johnson, a veteran pilot who had been repeatedly denied advancement at major airlines despite an exemplary record, as the new president of the subsidiary. Under Keisha's leadership, Elite implemented recruitment programs targeting underrepresented communities, mentorship initiatives pairing experienced staff with newcomers, and zero-tolerance policies for discriminatory behavior. The criminal cases against Jackson and Harold Walsh proceeded swiftly, with the mountain of evidence leaving little room for effective defense. Jackson pleaded guilty to assault and civil rights violations, receiving a suspended sentence conditional on community service, specifically, working with organizations that combated racial discrimination. Harold faced more serious charges of witness tampering and conspiracy, ultimately accepting a plea deal that included a substantial fine and house arrest. As part of their settlement agreements, both men were required to make public apologies acknowledging the harm they had caused. Jackson's statement, delivered at a press conference covered by national media, revealed a man finally confronting the prejudices that had shaped his behavior. "I was raised to believe that certain people deserved respect and others didn't," he admitted, his voice unsteady. "I never questioned those beliefs until they led me to commit an act of violence against someone who had done nothing to deserve it." I'm deeply ashamed of my actions and the pain I caused Ms. Montgomery and so many others through my attitudes and behavior. Harold's apology was more measured but no less significant coming from a man who had wielded enormous power in the industry for decades. I failed as a leader and as a human being, he acknowledged. By prioritizing connections and loyalty over fairness and merit, I helped perpetuate systems that harmed countless talented individuals and ultimately damaged the very industry I claimed to care about. No apology can undo that damage, but I am committed to supporting the reforms now reshaping aviation. 1 year and 2 months after the incident, Jasmine prepared for her first flight on Montgomery Aviation's newly acquired corporate jet. The aircraft, designed with input from the company's diverse engineering team, incorporated innovations that improved fuel efficiency, reduced noise pollution, and enhanced passenger comfort. More significant than the technological advances was the crew awaiting her arrival. Captain Maria Suarez, First Officer James Washington, and flight attendants Amir Khan and Danielle Chen represented the changing face of aviation, diverse in background but unified in their professional excellence. As Jasmine boarded, Amir greeted her with the respectful deference due any client, regardless of race, gender, or background. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Montgomery. We're honored to serve you today." The simple greeting, delivered with genuine warmth rather than forced politeness, represented everything Jasmine had fought for: not special treatment, but equal treatment, not lowered standards, but the opportunity for qualified individuals of all backgrounds to demonstrate their capabilities. Settling into her seat, Jasmine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The physical wound from Jackson's slap had healed within days. The psychological impact had taken longer to process. But the transformation of an industry would continue for generations, creating opportunities for countless individuals who might otherwise have been grounded by bias. Her phone chimed with a message from Thomas: "Montgomery stock hit all-time high today. Up 43% from pre-incident levels." The message confirmed what Jasmine had always believed, that diversity wasn't just morally right but economically smart. Companies that embraced inclusion gained access to wider talent pools, broader perspectives, and ultimately, better results. As the jet climbed into the clear blue sky, Jasmine remembered her mother's words from childhood: "The sky has no prejudice." Now, at last, the industry dedicated to navigating that sky was beginning to reflect the same truth. What began with a slap had culminated in a transformation. One moment of bigotry had unleashed a long-overdue reckoning. One woman's refusal to accept discrimination had created ripples that would benefit countless others who would never know her name. That was the true victory, not the court judgment, not the financial settlement, not even the industry reforms. The real triumph was in changing what people believed possible, in shifting expectations of what was acceptable, in elevating the standard for how human beings treated one another. As the jet reached cruising altitude, Jasmine gazed out at the endless horizon, filled with both satisfaction at what had been accomplished and determination for the work still ahead. The sky indeed belonged to everyone. And now, so did the path to reach it. Jasmine's story teaches us that true change requires both courage and strategy. When faced with discrimination, she didn't just react emotionally. She responded with calculated precision, using her position and resources to create systemic change. Her journey shows that individual acts of racism often reflect deeper institutional problems that can only be addressed through structural reforms. The most powerful lesson is that silence perpetuates injustice. By speaking up, Jasmine not only reclaimed her dignity but created opportunities for countless others facing similar barriers. Her experience demonstrates that discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's also bad business, wasting talent and limiting innovation. We also learn the importance of evidence in fighting prejudice. By documenting everything and gathering allies, Jasmine transformed a personal attack into a movement for justice. Her story reminds us that meaningful change rarely comes easily or quickly, but persistence eventually overcomes even deeply entrenched resistance. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine's victory shows that excellence truly is colorblind. When barriers fall, everyone benefits from the full spectrum of human potential. What would you have done in Jasmine's position? Would you have forgiven Jackson or held him accountable like she did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this story about overcoming racism inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of justice and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that one person can spark meaningful change. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice matters in the fight against discrimination.